Hey guys, welcome to the channel, and this is the first video in the channel, so we're going to start it off by talking about AI. We're going to talk about the technology, why it's making headlines, what it is all about, and then try to figure out why it is suddenly everywhere. So let's break it down in plain English. Let's get to it. So what is AI? Obviously, AI stands for artificial intelligence, and it's essentially, at the end of the day, teaching a computer to think and make decisions almost like a human, if not better, right? That's the entire idea of it. But instead of using neurons and emotions like people usually do, it's essentially designed to use math and logic. So there's no emotions into AI, at least at this point when it's trying to spit out or regurgitate some of that data. So if you think about it, imagine thinking of teaching your dog to play fetch. So you say fetch over and over and over again, especially if you train the dog until it understands what it needs to do or what it should do. And that's essentially AI is kind of like that. But instead of a dog, it's essentially like software or computers or technology learning from the huge amount of input of information that it's designed to do. And it essentially recognizes the patterns and then it decides to make those choices. So when did AI start? It depends on how far you really want to go back and how much you really want to argue the definition of AI. But essentially, at the end of the day, if you want to go all the way back in time, AI technically, in a way, started in the 1950s when, Mr. Alan Turing said, "Can machines think?" And that's when it really kicked off the idea, and all kinds of basic advancements have really been made, but only recently, in about 2022 to 2023 era, there's been a boom, mainstream hit in AI, especially back when OpenAI introduced ChatGPT 3. It had a huge bump, right? And then when it introduced ChatGPT 4, it really caught the world's attention, mainly because it was able to write poems, answer questions, do some thinking, summarize books, and sometimes even write code. It was pretty much going from a basic abacus or calculator to a full-blown conversation with the computer overnight. So what can it really do? We just touched on it, right? So AI today is like the Swiss Army knife. It can do a lot of things. And let's talk about some of the basic things it can do. It can write essays, can write emails, can create music, create artwork, generate videos, voices, translate languages, chat with customers or chatbots or chat with you. It could technically help doctors analyze images, all types of analytics that it can do, not just doctors, but pretty much in any industry. It can drive cars. Depending on who you talk to, they may or may not argue, right? Because the whole Tesla self-driving, that is AI powered. Not sure if everybody really understands that, but it also can power smart assistants, and that's things like Siri and your Amazon devices and things like that. So at the end of the day, just imagine giving your phone a brain and also a creative side. That's essentially what AI can. So I want to talk about self-driving cars for just a little bit because I know not everybody's really familiar with it, right? So Tesla has self-driving, and how that really works at the end of the day is they have cameras all throughout the car, and everybody who's driving, all of this stuff is essentially feeding data into the car. So Tesla, if you think about it, with all the hundreds of thousands of cars they have on the road, they have tons of driving data, and they use a lot of that data to really train AI. And then they have like a inference model that in the car. So when you're driving or when it's self-driving, it kind of also assesses all the metrics or telemetry, right? Cars on this side, cars on that side, lights red, all of this kind of stuff. And it can decide what to do at any given moment's time depending on the surroundings and also your navigation preference, right? So if it knows it needs to go here, it's not just turn left, go here, turn right, go here. It actually takes into account, yes, we need to go this way eventually, but depending on what's really happening, it's going to decide what to do there. So that is essentially AI driving the car. I know it's really early on, and Tesla may not advertise it in that way, but the idea of self-driving really has an AI driving that car, all right? So let's talk a little bit more about what it's being used now besides Tesla, right? Mainly because AI is used in pretty much almost everyday tasks that you may not even know of, right? So automotive tasks driving. But let's talk about automating repetitive tasks. So in repetitive tasks, things that you do every day, large companies, small companies, they've essentially automated it to some fashion, and then they plugged it in, I guarantee you, to some type of AI model that essentially learns from itself and then adapts. Personalized ads, that's also AI driven. They want to make ads personal to you depending on your preference and, pretty much your history to kind of personalize either an ad or a commercial, it's the same thing, to you to try to essentially at the end of the day sell you something. It's also used to detect fraud, especially in criminal and financial industries. There's tons of transactions and data and things that happen. In order for somebody to assess or intake all of that, it's going to take hundreds of people of man hours, but instead of that, they just feed it into a computer with the AI model, and it eventually just spits something out or identifies patterns. That's really how a lot of that fraud detection stuff kind of works. It can also, since we're talking about personalized ads, when you watch things on Netflix or Amazon or any of those streaming platforms, it knows what you watched. It knows your profile, and it knows what's on your watch list, all of this stuff. And then therefore, when you log in, it will be like, recommended for you. Let's put that there, right? So that's also AI driven, and especially in higher education or maybe even high schools these days. AI is used to grade papers, right? And then healthcare industry, they diagnose diseases, like X-ray image or some type of image you may come across. They'll feed it through some AI system, and AI can definitely read it better than the human can. Sure, AI is making huge advancements there, but it still can process tons of images way faster than any doctor can. That's not to say there's no role for a doctor, right? You obviously need to proofread some of this stuff, but if you just want to get through, the first analysis of a lot of that stuff, AI is really good there. So if you want to make an analogy, think of it like you have 1 billion or 1 million or however many interns you need who never sleep, don't need rest, don't have attitude, don't need any of this. You just feed stuff in, something comes out, but you still need at the end of the day to validate or check some of that data, right? So let's talk about some of the major players that are in AI. Pretty much every big corporation that you can think of these days are pretty much in AI, right? So Microsoft invested heavily in OpenAI. Sure, they have Microsoft Copilot, but at the end of the day, a lot of that stuff is running, OpenAI behind the scenes. Google, a lot of people know, may have been one of the first ones to release like a language model. It wasn't really hugely known, but recently they have Gemini, and they have Gemini 2.5, which is like really advanced. They're really ranking high, and we'll talk more about that in future videos. Amazon is also integrating AI into its AWS services. So if you work in technology, there's AWS Q. They have Amazon Bedrock and SageMaker, where you can get coordinate and deploy some of your own models and stuff like that. Obviously, Alexa has a lot of the AI incorporated into it. We already talked about Tesla, but there's also other companies such as Anthropic, which may not be as widely or hugely known in the standard population, but if you're in technology, you definitely know Anthropic, because that's essentially the company that powers Claude 2.5 or 3.5 Sonnet and those types of things. There's Maestro. Anyways, there's tons of people investing millions, if not billions of dollars into this industry. So speaking of that industry, let's talk a little bit about source. So there's open source and closed source. And if you don't know software technology, it's essentially, at the end of the day, you could think of it as there's something that's a black box and you just essentially pay for a service, and then there's stuff that's pretty much open and you can see pretty much all the details of it, right? So things like OpenAI and ChatGPT, that's closed source. Meta, or the Facebook company, has introduced this model called Llama, which they actually made open source. Google has DeepMind, world-class research and all that kind of stuff. Anthropic's Claude is, kind of almost neck and neck with ChatGPT, but that one is also closed source. There's also XAI, which, if you've been reading the headlines and all that stuff, has recently acquired X, which, if you think about it, that is huge, right? So XAI is the company. Grok is really the interface or the model that a lot of people are familiar with. But the reason that XAI acquiring X is a huge deal, because X, essentially Twitter, is streaming pretty much as close to real-time information on the platform as much as possible with all the millions, if not billions, of users. So now the model, or their training model, or their capability, has access to real time or real source data. Sure, a lot of it's noise and stuff like that, but it has a lot of access to real time, real data, and it's eventually, I'm sure they're working behind the scenes to be able to somehow incorporate it in and feed it in real time. So I know not everybody is really going to be understanding exactly what we're talking about, but that actually gives them a huge leap. Now, we have no idea if Elon designed that on purpose back in the day, but now it's there. So let's talk a little bit about China, because China has been in the news besides all the tariffs and stuff like that. So China was at a huge disadvantage, and then let's say a lot of nations had tried to keep or limit China's ability to compete in a way, right? So export controls on computer chips is a huge way of doing that. But the reason China was in the news about AI is because they released a model called DeepSeek, and it is an open source model, but the big differentiator here is that they were able to make a model that is, on benchmark wise, comparable, if not perform better than some of the closed source top leader AI models in the world, right? So things like OpenAI's ChatGPT, they were able to do it and compete with it without having the most advanced technology chips available. And because of that, they had to make some type of innovation, and they were able to train these models at a significantly cheaper cost than let's say OpenAI's ability to train ChatGPT. So if you think about it that way, the necessity to be able to compete and build those things and not have the greatest hardware or do that actually really drove them to make innovations, because need or necessity essentially is the driver to innovation half the time, and they were able to do that for much less. It kind of blew a hole in the AI industry. Everybody started questioning, wow, do you really need all of those NVIDIA chips, and do you really need all of the best? So we're not going to go too far into that, mainly because it opens up all kinds of tangents into, well, did they really create it? Did they just distill a bunch of stuff that they had and they just copy it? We're not going to get into that, but the point is DeepSeek, which is the model that's supposed to be competing with ChatGPT, has been released for much less and also cost significantly less. Whether or not that's all true on paper, we know we're going to have to figure out that on the world. But the important thing is that they have open sourced the model. So moving on a little bit from that, let's take a little bit of a look on how AI actually works. So as I mentioned earlier, AI learns by taking data and then making connections. Almost like a kid learns what a cat is, and then next time they see it, they point out cat, and then it kind of reinforces them, hey, that furry looking animal with the tail is a cat. Then they see it again, and they see it again, and over time, a repetitive time, that they've ingrained in their brain the picture of a cat, and they know exactly what a cat looks like. So that's essentially a way an AI learns some of that. So sometimes it uses a thing called neural networks. So if you imagine a virtual brain, instead of neurons and stuff, just think of digital neurons that mimic how a human brain works, but it's faster, and it has no organic disabilities or any of that, and it doesn't need any coffee breaks or sleep or anything, right? So it's a computer machine that does essentially what a human can, but faster without any rest. That's essentially how it's going to be learning. So it's going to be easy to remember some of this stuff, or I'm going to try to make it easier by trying to reference some analogies here. So AI, think of it like autocomplete on steroids, right? Because as you're typing your Gmail or something, you're seeing like this highlight or a grayed out text. You push tab and it just completes. It knows what the next few letters should be based on the pattern that it's learned in the language, so it can put out based on what text is already there. And by using pattern recognition and statistics, it can actually project what the next word should be. It can also, like a calculator, that it can write novels, because as the story progresses, it can take an infinite number of turns, and then depending on what you essentially ask the AI or what type of tone you really put into it, it can take that novel in an infinite number of ways. There's also Microsoft Copilot, which can help you write Word, calculate things on Excel. If you ever use Excel and you start putting all these formulas and things in, now it has the ability to auto-complete or auto-summarize or any of that stuff. So think about part of your brain, but essentially works in overdrive all the time, that has photographic memory and can also do pattern matching. So an army of interns that never sleeps, doesn't need coffee, learns and gets better over time and never needs breaks. At the end of the day, that almost seems somewhat like a futuristic model, and that's essentially where we're going, or like a genie, right? Because you can almost ask a genie for pretty much anything. Yes, AI is still early on, even though as great as it is today, it's still really early on, but it has a lot of room for improvement, and that improvement is being made fast. Let's talk about what can really come up next, right? So like I said, AI is just getting started. We are just starting to see AI models get better. We're just starting to see AI being integrated into everything: computer, tools, everyday life, interactions, finance, and everything, research, artists, doctors, everywhere. But the big question that always comes up all the time is ethics, privacy, jobs, and misinformation. And this is where a lot of the bigger companies are saying, hey, we have to regulate this really, really well, because, you know, if you're, let's say, a bad actor, you can really take it and train some really bad models to help you do a lot of really bad things. And that's where a lot of the regulations need to come into place, because, you know, everybody's going to always refer, oh yeah, don't connect it to like military systems, because we've seen too many sci-fi movies like Skynet or Terminator and all that stuff, right? So yeah, sure, that could probably happen sometime in the near future. Hopefully it never does, but that's where you have to really start making smart decisions. Then, since everything is listening and all the data is being fed in to train the AI, you know, there's privacy concerns, because who knows where the data is actually being kept? Who knows what the AI actually retains? Who knows all of this stuff? Sure, the trainer, some of those things work. There's a bunch of conspiracies on the training models and the data, and that's been fed and stuff like that. But because of that, there's also a lot of rumors for misinformation. And this is where we really need to be careful, especially because as technology advances, misinformation is already really big right now. Image generation is really big, and that also leads to misinformation. Video generation is really big, and that also leads to misinformation. So it's more important right now, if you take away anything from this video, is that you need to understand what is happening and how it works, mainly because for your own safety. So I couldn't really get it out there. So that's about as easy as I can make AI. If you want to dive into anything a little bit deeper, definitely let us know. I will go out and say one thing about how it really works a little bit more in general compared to hardware, because another reason that AI has been taking off a lot right now is because right now we have a ton of data. Every day, minute, second that goes by, there's tons of data points that are being generated. It has to be stored, digitized somewhere, which is happening all the time. So there's a ton of data. All that data needs to be processed to train AI models. All that processing uses compute power. And everybody who's been in this AI space knows the big leader in the compute power for processing or training these AI models is NVIDIA. And that's kind of why their stock has been skyrocketing, because they have these GPUs that are essentially optimized for training those things. And those GPUs cost an arm and a leg. So yes, these large companies are investing millions of dollars in the data centers and all this stuff to train these models. But because technology for compute has advanced and the amount of data is getting exponentially larger, combining those two really helps create those models, and that's another reason why it's advancing so quickly. There's going to be tons of advancements that need to be made there in order to be able to make this scale. There's also a huge amount of concern for energy, because the more compute there is to train all of these things, the more energy that's going to take if we don't make these chips more efficient, which, you know, they're already working on a lot of that stuff. So energy is going to be a huge sector. Data is going to be a huge sector. Manufacturing for training all of these models, and everybody tying into these models and trying to use AI to pretty much do everything is going to be big. So I'm not going to dive into it too much more, but hopefully this video has helped you guys out. If you have any questions, let us know. Have a great day, and we'll see you guys next time.